All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is John D'Agostino from Pentegra. And first and foremost, we want to thank you for spending some time with us today to talk about 316 fiduciary outsourcing on 316 Day. We're really excited to have this day to create some awareness around best practices and how Pentegra can be viewed as a partner and a thought leader in this space. So I want to begin this presentation on two notes. I want to introduce myself, talk a little bit about Pentegra, but then tee up what we're trying to accomplish today. The title of the presentation is the Retirement Plan Easy Button. And I'm sure many of you on this call remember back in the day the commercials about Staples where somebody's office would be completely disorganized and they would want to have it all fixed or cleaned up, and they would push that easy button and bingo, all of their problems were solved. Today, we're here to utilize that same concept around managing your retirement plan because, as at least we know, and my experiences working with advisors and sponsors over the past 24 years, I've seen a lot of the same sentiment where managing these plans, administering these plans, worrying about the investments, and ultimately getting participants to a place where they can comfortably retire sounds wonderful in concept, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. So we are trying to provide resources that can help sponsors manage their businesses and manage their plans without a tremendous workload and time constraint. So I think I mentioned before, this is John, and I reside out of Chicago, and I represent Pentegra and work with advisors and plan sponsors in the Midwest. For those of you that aren't that familiar with Pentegra, we are a administrator and record keeper, and primarily a fiduciary. We've been in existence for over 75 years. If you were to think about that legacy and the history of Pentegra, when we started, we were asked to build a group of plans for defined benefit organizations, right? And these organizations had things that they wanted to accomplish, but they wanted it to be as simple as possible. So while working with Pentegra, we were able to build a structure where we acted as both the investment fiduciary and the administrative fiduciary for this group of plans. Fast forward, over the past 75 years, we've broadened our offerings through bundled record keeping and administration, being a third-party administrator, and most recently offering 316 fiduciary services as an overlay. Having said that, since our inception, close to 80 years ago, we have first and foremost acted as a fiduciary. So we bring a tremendous amount of experience and a tremendous amount of clients where we have taken them through this process to not only help protect the liability that they face as sponsors, but to hopefully make their lives as easy as possible. I am here with two panelists, both Matt Tender and Mark Olson, representing BCM Wealth and PENTalk. They are folks who are thought leaders in the industry. They have worked with retirement plan sponsors and have a considerable amount of experience in helping clients solve their needs. So before we get into any of the content in this presentation, what I first like to do is turn it over to my two co-panelists here, have them talk a little bit about themselves, their businesses, and what they're seeing in the marketplace. So why don't we start with you, Mark?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, Mark Olson here, Managing Director at PlanPilot. And so PlanPilot is a Chicago-based consulting firm. However, we have a pretty extensive footprint in that we're in 17 states, work exclusively with clients on institutional relationships. So don't provide wealth management, rather our focus is at the committee level or the C-suite level, so to speak, helping them manage their retirement programs. One of the interesting things that I would share is I often refer to myself as a career consultant. Day one out of college, I started working in the retirement space, and I'm dating myself, but my picture probably gives it away as well. Back in the day, while 401k plans were certainly in existence, there was a much larger orientation for defined benefit plans. And as the 401k as well as 403b plans became more prevalent, and certainly employers shifted from DB to DC, in part because of the desire to not only reduce their own liabilities, but also to reduce the complexity. Now, I see a little irony there as I look back on that career, recognizing part of the desire to move away from defined benefit plans was the desire to shift liabilities as well as to reduce complexities. And yet we find ourselves here in 2022 with a growing number of complexities, regulation, and certainly litigation in the defined contribution marketplace. And so, we've certainly been at it a long time. I've been at it a long time as well. But one of the benefits, which I think you'll hear on today's conversation, is really what I think is a unique but growing area of the ability to address those two items, the complexity as well as the litigation piece of it. So again, pleased to be part of this panel.
How about we jump to you, Matt?
Perfect. Well, John, thanks for including myself in this podcast. I'm very excited to be part of the panel. My name is Matt Tendler. I work at Biddle Capital Management. I'm the Director of Retirement Plans. Our company is a fiduciary platform. We deal with individual wealth management and employer-sponsored plans, and we take a 338 position on the employer-sponsored plan side. We're also the only firm in Delaware to be CFEX certified. So again, just boosting our fiduciary process and auditing to make sure that we're going and abiding by the best practices within the industry. We're trying to make sure that, similar to what Mark said, simplify operations, automate as many administrative duties as possible, shift liability and risk away from the plan sponsors, and to make sure that we're the quarterback in managing the retirement plans. In a past life, I was an ice hockey player and a coach, so I like to try and think about acting as a coach to plan sponsors or individuals, helping them manage the complexities of investments, and also ERISA law in dealing with the employer-sponsored plan side. We have about half of our business as employer-sponsored plans, 401ks, 403bs, cash balance plans, and about half of our business is individual wealth management. So we get a good, diverse clientele base. We work with a number of institutions on the large side, plan size of 50 and above, and we also deal with smaller size plans of $5 million and below. So we get the opportunity to really understand the needs of our clients and provide unbiased, independent advice to provide the highest level solution for the plan sponsor and the plan participants. But I'm excited to have the opportunity to join in on the call and talk about 316 fiduciary services to hopefully, again, provide a solution to streamline the retirement plan management.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. And I've heard, I heard similar themes from the two of you. I'll use your words, simplify, automate the complexities of these plans, as well as protecting, sponsors from that potential liability if things go wrong, right? And as sponsors, there always is going to be an element of liability when they are listed as the fiduciaries. The other thing that you mentioned specifically, Matt, and I know that Mark, this is a part of your business as well, is the term 338. Right now, if we were to think about what a 338 is, it's essentially someone who handles the investment side of a defined contribution, defined benefit plan, right? So that person or group will be assisting the plan sponsor in selecting the investments, monitoring the investments to ensure that they have the right series of funds for the participants within that plan. Now, it's been my experience over the past 20-something years that if you were to think about a plan and think about the two components of the plan, right? There are the investment side of the house and there's the administrative side of the house. I'm not here to suggest one is easier or harder than the other, but they're both complex. And if you were to ask a sponsor, why would they hire someone like Matt or someone like Mark to handle the investment side, I typically hear the same answer every time, and it's that we don't want to do it. Do this for us, please. We know that you guys have the expertise. We know you guys have the infrastructure, and we would just feel more comfortable having a resource like yourselves to assist us with this process. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Now, if we were to flip to that second pillar that I mentioned, which is the administrative side, I would ask Mark and Matt, and I know the answer, so it's going to be more rhetorical, but on a daily basis, where are you getting more questions? Is it on the lineup, or is it on the 10, the 20, the 30 administrative functions that are occurring within a plan? And, if I could see their faces, I'm sure they're smiling that almost universally, the administrative functions of a plan are where we're seeing more and more questions on a regular basis. So 316 is a way to give that 338-like or that investment fiduciary-like feature that's already predominant on the investment side, on the administrator side. So today, if we were to look at, some of the challenges that are facing sponsors, there's just a lot of complexity and a lot of things sponsors have to think about. And like I just talked about, many sponsors want these things just done for them. Legislation is not getting more simple, it's getting more complicated. And with COVID showing us that many sponsors are now understaffed and perhaps overworked, or have had to just change the way we do business, whether that's move to a more virtual environment, find a different type of staff or resources. Tons of times that we talk to sponsors, these resources are thin, and the plan is not necessarily the top priority that these business owners are working on. So why don't we throw the first question here over to you, Matt? What are the needs that you're hearing from your sponsors right now? What challenges are coming up more frequently for you?
I think it boils down to time. Just like you said, most HR staff is either understaffed and overworked, or in the world that we've been living in, there's been a lot of turnover. So the administrative side, with a lot of our plan sponsors, we've been dealing with new people coming on with limited experience or exposure to the plan, and not fully understanding the plan rules and provisions, and also having younger individuals that haven't had experience yet with the plan, that have a lot of questions. When am I eligible? What's my vesting schedule? Can I take a distribution? How do I process a hardship distribution? So the things that can be a little bit complicated or burdensome to administrate a 401k plan really falls back on, like you said, the plan rules, the plan provisions, and the plan administrative side. The investments, just like you talked about, those are relatively simple and easy to deal with, especially when dealing with a participant. But if we have the ability to outsource or automate the administrative side, it insulates the plan sponsor from having to have some of those difficult or challenging conversations or passing along the wrong information. I see plan sponsors interpreting a rule incorrectly and at no fault of their own, administrating the plan not in accordance to the plan document, and that can always raise a red flag or make things more challenging. So really, that's what I feel is on the administrative side. It's a lot of that administrative work and trying to find time and allowing the HR staff to do what they're hired to do, what their specialized niche is, and allowing the experts to manage the plan to try and make it as self-sustaining as possible.
All right, thanks for sharing that. Now, Mark, I know you and I have known each other for some time, and your business perhaps focuses on a different segment, right, of the retirement plan market. So, are you seeing anything different, based upon the clients that you?
I would say in all candor, I think Matt hit it on the head quite well in terms of the understaffed and overtaxed HR departments, and where I probably get a little more nervous if we're not hearing from a new HR person questions about how to administer their plan, because we do value and appreciate the questions, because that means that they're looking to administer the plan correctly, and no one obviously sets out to not administer the plan correctly. But the acknowledgement is when there's a bit of a silence, there's the worry sets in, is that, hey, are they overlooking something? They know that they're tasked with trying to identify new hires and focus on other areas to keep their operations going. But the recognition is that this environment is so complex, and making a few mistakes does compound over time. And we see that certainly evidence of that when working with clients on their corrections of not having people eligible in the proper time period, or having some renew hires and not recognizing that they actually do need to be put back in the plan. So there's numerous examples that I can certainly cite that getting on the front end of it, that administration done correctly, not only saves time, but ultimately saves the business owner or the organization a fair amount of money, because it does cost a fair amount, both in legal expenses, as well as the repayment to those participants.
And, I flipped to the next slide as you were talking, because I think it's a great backdrop for the different areas that add up to additional complexity, from a plan sponsor standpoint. And, Matt, when you were speaking, you threw out things like eligibility and calculating vesting, ensuring the distributions are handled correctly. And that burden primarily falls on the sponsor, right? And sometimes in conjunction with the record keeper, these tasks may be to some degree done for them, but the accuracy to ensure that they are being done correctly and the verification of that still falls on their shoulders. So if we're talking about what is a 316, right, a 316 is essentially designed to do what you're seeing at the top of that screen, minimize the risk, minimize the responsibility, and minimize the time, required to run a retirement plan. There are a variety of things that go into being a fiduciary. And as I just spoke about, there are two things where wonderful consultants like Matt and Mark can help sponsors alleviate those two things. We talked about the investment side, acting as a 338 or a 321, just code for an investment fiduciary, just different degrees. And on the administrative side, that's what we're here to talk about today. Having a partner who can act as a 316 and help sponsors save time performing these tasks and also protect them for ensuring that these tasks are being done accurately. So rather than go through these tasks, line item by line item, I'd be interested in hearing from both you and from both Mark and Matt here. So before we got on this call, the three of us were sort of talking offline a little bit about the needs and some of the questions they're getting from clients. And there is not one size fits all. There is not one solution that makes sense for every single client. And a firm like PENTalk, when I mentioned earlier that we are a fiduciary first, and we have, many, many decades of experience here, there's not just one way you can access our expertise. There are multiple ways that you can tap into PENTalk's experience and utilize our services. So, Mark, why don't we start with you? I know that, you have been a great client of PENTalk's, and you have a lot of clients who utilize services like this in a variety of ways. So why don't you kick us off by talking about, what some of those needs are and where they might be able to go from a solution perspective?
And I would start with one that I think is very timely at the moment. Many organizations today are preparing for their auditors to be on site, or at least maybe work virtually with their retirement programs and prep for the 5500 and other audit work, right? So I don't think too many folks really get excited about having the auditors that audit completed on their plan. It's a distraction for many of our clients, but it's a required distraction, right? And I'm using distraction purposely in that I think a lot of times folks go into it as, hey, we've got to do it, but we've got our day job to do as well. And how quickly can I get the auditor in and out? One of the key benefits we've seen, and as John noted, we've got a number of clients that have really moved to a 316 environment. At this point, as I was prepping for our call today, looked at our CRM, and it's about a quarter of our client base today uses a 316 service provider. And an acknowledgement is in the audit for those clients that have adopted the 316, they have a much lower time commitment because that 316 provider does the lion's share of the work. And I know with the PENTalk specifically, not only do they really assist with that plan audit, but they're the ones that are actually signing the 5500 and noting that it's accurate. So that really does not only alleviate the day-to-day administrators from a lot of that audit prep and audit work when the folks are on site, but also lowers the risk of that party that is signing that 5500 that often doesn't have a great deal of time to review all the idiosyncrasies related to the numbers that go into that annual filing. So those are just a couple of the things I know. Trying to leave some for certainly to address as well. But I think those are, again, from a very timely perspective, top of mind today.
Thanks, Mark. You kind of cut out a little bit at the end there, so I'm not sure if your audio kind of came in and out. But we appreciate, the thoughts around audits, and it's definitely something that sponsors, of a certain size, 100 participants or more, have to address on a year-to-year basis. And there is a cost, whether it's a time cost as well as a cost for pursuing or for performing the audit, that having a 316 fiduciary can definitely alleviate some of those elements that a sponsor has to potentially deal with on a year-to-year basis. Matt, what about you? I know we had a little bit of a different conversation around some of the things that you are hearing from your clients and what solutions you're recommending.
Yeah, I think it boils down to a similar conversation about outsource or automating the services of the retirement plan. This is relatively new. Multiple employer plans have been around for a while, but the pooled employer plan was signed into law in the Secure Act to allow for greater economies of scale, but really allowing the 401k to become a service. Instead of having to administer and bear the majority of the responsibility and the risk, a pooled employer plan allows for a plan sponsor to not be the plan sponsor anymore and be a plan adopter underneath the umbrella of a pooled plan provider. So again, boiling it down to the simplest of terms, similar to a 338 advisor, 316 fiduciary, it just allows for the plan sponsor to automate a lot of this process to make things easier. Signing the 5500, who's going to do that? If you have a 316 fiduciary, the fiduciary is going to be taking the responsibility to complete, sign, and submit all the 5500 filings. But again, it really boils down to having the conversation with the client, highlighting what the ultimate needs are for each client, and then understanding that there are different levels of service that are available. You can have a normal TPA that is there to help and assist and be there to guide you, but not take on that full fiduciary capacity. You can have a 316 fiduciary to make sure that they are taking on the risk, the liability, and the responsibility to administer the plan. And then the highest level, to alleviate as much risk, as much responsibility, as much of the workload, is that combination of a 316 PPP and a 338 underneath the umbrella of a pooled employer plan. So there's a lot of options out there. It really boils down to highlighting the needs, the wants, and desires of the plan and the plan sponsor, mixing up and matching up the available options, and building the best platform to administer the plan to the best of the ability of the plan document, which hopefully ultimately leads to better outcomes for your plan participants and easier use. And again, gives hours back to the HR staff and to let them do what they want to do in terms of normal day-to-day business, instead of having to get through the audit or get through the 5500. They have additional services and vendors and fiduciaries to hold their hand and make sure everything is 100% accurate and done in a prudent manner.
So Matt, you made a really good point there. Mark talked about sort of specific duties that can be quite burdensome and complex, such as all. And I know earlier you referenced other elements of administering a plan that also might be burdensome, might take up some time. And we just kind of pivoted into a comment that I made earlier more broadly, but I think you really dialed in on it. And that's around the different ways to access a 316, right? And I heard you use terms like multiple employer plans and PEPs, right? And these are more pool type structures, right, where employers can join these structures and get economies of scale potentially on price, and also alleviate some of the administrative functionality on a broader scale. But the third element that I'd also like to talk about today is what we're calling a 316 overlay, right? And what I mean when I say 316 overlay is that at PENTegra, we have relationships with a variety of bundled providers. And through our relationships with these bundled record keepers and administrators, we have the capabilities of layering PENTegra's 316 services on top of a bundled plan. Now, I am not suggesting that one way is better than another, but to Matt's point, right, it is all based upon what the particular needs of a sponsor are. And I have worked with many advisors and in light of the current legislative environment with the Secure Act and many smaller plans needing to set up a retirement plan, what's the best way to get those folks into a plan that's easy for them to understand, that's going to do a lot of this functionality for them, and that's going to be easy on the advisor or consultant? Because if you take on a significant amount of smaller plans, clearly the workload for your practice goes up. So we have seen circumstances where putting folks into a pool type structure makes sense. But I'm also seeing more and more advisors and sponsors say, well, can I do the same thing in a standalone single plan? And the answer is that you can. Now, does it matter what size, right? Does it matter if it's a small plan or a large plan? Should we think about this differently? So the answer, at least from my experience, is no. Because all sponsors essentially, and the word fiduciary essentially is not based on size, right? We all have the same challenges. We all have the same needs. And we all have the same basic goal, which is to have this thing running as a tool to retain employees, to generate interest, obviously, from new employees, and to get people to a comfortable retirement, all without providing headaches to the people who are managing these things. So what can the 316 do for plan sponsors? And I think this screen sort of summarizes it all. But the goal here is to not only minimize the risk, but it's to save time and give those folks running their businesses more time to run their business without worrying about the complexity and the compliance that comes with running a plan. So let me throw out one last question to each of you. When I used to work on the investment management side, and I sold a lot of different types of investments, specifically target date funds. And after a while, target date funds became more and more adopted, and they weren't in the very beginning. And also people thought that they were all relatively the same. We all know today that that's not the case. They're all different. Same thing with 338 and 321. It's now an industry standard, but was not for some time. We believe that 316 is in the same boat as those other strategies in their early days. How would you guys talk about 316s, in a perfect world? Are they all the same? And what do you look for, when you're looking for a good 316 partner? How about we start with you, Matt?
Well, I think it really boils down to communication, right? Being available, responding to emails, and making sure that they have the history and the reputation and the experience to back up the responsibility that they have to administer the plan. We've been working with PENTagra for a little bit of time, and whenever a plan sponsor has a question, there's a direct representative they can reach out to and get an immediate answer. And I think for anybody, especially in the world that we're living in now, where most of us are doing Zoom meetings or working virtually, in most of the industries that I deal with, it's hard to get a person on the phone or answer an email back in a timely manner. So for me, a perfect 316 is someone that's responsive, answers emails, is a collaborator in planning the plan design, and obviously administers the plan according to the plan document to a T.
Thank you for that, Matt. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I know we've got a fair number of clients that work again with PENTagra, and what I would share is a more recent document. I think it's in the last year or so that you all have developed that I think has been really kind of a critical win, if you will, for more the business side of client base. Certainly HR folks were well aware of the services and the lower risks and everything you brought to the table. I think a lot of times the finance folks just looked at it as potentially another cost. But as you all developed that scorecard, and I've shared it with clients and really highlighted all that you did over the course of the prior year, it's very akin to, on the investment side, our watch list or our scorecard. Those financial folks really gravitate towards that, and they just look down that list of things that you all do, and you can just see them like just ticking off their head. Okay, that's good, and their comfort level is dramatically increased as a result of adopting a 316 approach, especially what we're seeing with that scorecard by PENTagra.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we are at the end of our time here. So I want to wrap up with just a few quick comments. First and foremost, thank you to all that have dialed in and listened to us today. A big thank you to Matt and Mark for participating here. We have two, very successful, very thoughtful, and very experienced advisors and consultants on the phone with us that, provide great service and expertise to their clients. And in summary, they just said it, both of them. Working with the 316 is going to definitely provide some value through time saving, through taking some of the complexity and burden off the sponsor's plate, and working with someone that has experience in doing this, has the resources and infrastructure, and that knows how to solve for these problems is paramount, because not all 316s are created equal. So understanding who your partners are and putting these best practices in place will not only make the sponsors more successful, but can continue to make advisors, like many of you are in this call, even more successful. So again, thank you all for your time, and we look forward to working with you going forward.